All right, Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Ecclesiastes chapter 12. We should be able to finish up today. We looked last week as we talked about chapter 11. Solomon painted a very nice picture of youth, about being young, about the benefits of being young. In fact, in chapter 11, he compared youth to light as opposed to the darkness of old age. And in that context, in chapter 11, he really gave two thoughts. The early part of the chapter, he dealt with the work that ought to be done. The planting, the sowing, the reaping, the busyness. Take advantage of the opportunity that you have while you're young to work, to do, to accomplish, because that opportunity is likely not to be there. Certainly maybe as you get older, the time element of it may still be there. You have the same number of hours in the day as a young person does, but obviously the older one is not going to be able to accomplish as much work as a young one could potentially. So work hard. And then the second thought that he gave in that context was to be joyful about it, to enjoy youth. He mentions going and pursuing the desires of the heart and the sight of the eyes. Go do things, go enjoy life, see things, go places, enjoy that opportunity. And so those were good thoughts about being young and then taking advantage of the blessings of youth. The bridge is chapter 12, verse 1, where he says, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth." Okay, so chapter 12, number 1, let's talk about, first of all, this reminder to the youth. Solomon encourages us to take those days of youth and remember our Creator. He had noted in chapter 11, we read verse 9, "But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment." After he told the listener to rejoice in thy youth, to expel it, to use it, to take advantage of it, but keeping in mind that you give an account for those things. God will bring thee into judgment. He tells them now to remember the Creator. Young people should remember their Creator before the sunset of life. He says in verse 12, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them." Again, the word evil in this context doesn't necessarily mean sinful as much as it's referring to the troubles, the trouble that comes. And again, he's comparing the days of the youth as compared to the days of old age. To anyone that was young, Solomon would tell them, to remember the Creator, because there are days that are going to come that are going to be filled with trouble and potentially lacking in pleasure. You don't want to wait until those days. You don't want to wait until the days of trouble, the days of old age, to make God a priority. It's easy to put those things off, right? You look at chapter 11 and all the things that he told us to enjoy while we're young. The ability to work, the ability to go, the ability to see and do all of those things. Yes, go, do those things. Take every advantage of your youth that you possibly can, but don't neglect the Lord. Don't neglect to be mindful and considerate of the Creator. You do want to keep him in mind. This is not something that Solomon is saying, hey, while you're young, go and do and see and enjoy life all that you can. And then when you get older, you'll have time to really focus on those things. That's not what his intent was. If that's what you got from chapter 11, he would try to, clarify that you still need to remember thy Creator in the days of thy youth. I think it's important to challenge, and, we would challenge the teenagers that we have, the young people that are here, and, in the other Sunday school classroom, to give God the best years of your life. Don't neglect in the days of youth where there is energy, where there is ability. Don't neglect to give God some of those years. It's easy to think that, when you get older, I'll be wiser, I'll be able to dedicate more thought, more time, more energy, maybe to those things, the things of the considerate things, the things that don't take as much energy or as much effort or as much activity. There's activity and energy that can be expended in the Lord's work. And we want to remember to give God even some of the best years of our life. Give God some of those days when you have so little else to care about. In those days, care about God. He's not saying that, that young people don't have any cares. But you read chapters 11 and 12 next to each other, and it's obvious in his comparison that he believes and understands young people have very, very little to care about in light of those that are older. All of the responsibilities that grow upon you as age comes upon you. While you don't have those things, while you don't have as many cares of this world, make sure that you still care about God. Make sure that you still be mindful and thoughtful of your Creator. You don't want to get older and not have an established relationship with God. Okay? You don't want to waste your youth. You don't want to waste your energy, your activity, your effort, and then get to 50, 60 years old and you don't have a relationship with God and you're trying to figure out how to start one from scratch. That is not how you want to see life played out. Okay? It's not as easy potentially as you might think it is. Don't wait for the days of old age, and then specifically, as he would say here, don't wait for the days of trouble. We would say that to anybody. There's a lot of folks that's when they take concern for the things of the Lord, or that's when they take concern to pray or to establish a relationship with God when there's trouble. When things are great, youth compared to age, light compared to darkness, ability compared to non-ability. It's easy in those days to neglect the Lord. And that's what he's cautioning against here. Remember, while you're young, while you still have all that energy, while you still have all of that ability and everything that I told you to use and to enjoy, be mindful of the Lord. Don't neglect to consider him while you're living life, while you're pursuing, while you're living your dreams that he told you to live. Make sure a portion of that is still the Lord. Okay? Make sure a portion of that is still to remember thy Creator. All right, number 2, let's talk about old age. Because he's going to spend quite a bit of time here now in chapter 12 talking about old age. And he's going to expand on the troubles that come with old age. So when in chapter 11, he told you about youth and all the abilities that they afford and all the blessings there are of youth, he's going to expound that a little deeper now as he's going to tell you some of the troubles you will run into as you get older. Verse 2 says, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. Old age is pictured as a time where things grow dim. Now that's a continuation of what he had talked about in chapter 11 when he talked, chapter 11 verse 7, truly the light is sweet. And as he began to talk about youth, that's compared to light. But now, as he begins to talk about the older age, the days coming, the years drawing nigh, the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened. Obviously, darkness and rain, as it is here in verse 12, are picturing the troubles of old age. Now, is he saying that that's the only time of trouble? No, of course not. But, man, when you're young, you can kind of see the cycle, right? You've got light, and sure, it gets dark, but the next morning it gets light again. And that's a cycle that continues. Or he mentions in verse 2, he says, nor the clouds return after the rain. Rain picturing trouble there. Well, it rains on everybody. Everybody gets rain. But, when in compared to youth, you get the rain, and then the sun shines after it, and it's over, and it's on to the next thing. But look how he pictures it here as you get older. In verse 2, he says, the clouds return after the rain. That's discouraging to think that, just after it rains, you look outside and boom, here comes another set of rain clouds. I mean, he's picturing this as a dark, gloomy, grim. He's not going to paint a very pretty picture of what it's like to get old. And in that negativity, what you're supposed to gain from it is really the opposite. You're supposed to then be challenged to while you're reading this, while you have youth, while you don't have these days upon you, to use them wisely. It would be very understandable for an old person reading Ecclesiastes chapter 12 to get very discouraged, because it's like a guy looking in the mirror. It's telling you everything that you are living through, everything that you have to expect in these last years of your life, and it's discouraging. Look at verse 3. He says, in the days when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves. As he's talking about your body there, the keepers, the strong men, your arms, your legs, everything that's currently strong someday is going to falter. There will be a day that if you live long enough, your legs will cease to be able to bear the weight that's above them. And you will hunch over, and you will struggle to walk, and you will limp, and you may need a cane. You may need a walker. You may need to be pushed about in a wheelchair. He says in verse number 3, the grinders cease because they are few. Now, we are blessed to live in a day where we have dentists, and we understand about tooth decay. We understand about all the things that we can do preventatively to keep our teeth as long as possible. If you live 70, 80, 90 years, even if you take really good care of them as a young person, your teeth are going to start to wear out. And some of them may fall out. And, I can't imagine what it was like, the toothaches and the things that they endured before, we understood about modern medicine and the different things about, taking care of our teeth the way that we do now. But he says, the day is coming when the grinders or your teeth, they're going to run out. You're going to lose them. And those that look out the windows be darkened. There's a day that comes to an old person when their eyesight begins to fail. And they have to start with some bifocals so that they can read. And then they have to go to trifocals, and then they have to have cataract surgery. And then at the end, you see, what do you see in churches? You see the older folks with the large print Bibles and a magnifying glass still sitting over it reading it. Why? Because your eyesight is it runs out. Verse 4. The doors shall be shut in the streets. There's a day that comes when a man's hearing begins to fail. It says there, when the sound of grinding is low. Those noises that were once pretty loud, the grinding at the mill, you wouldn't think that there'd be a day that would come that you would struggle to hear a loud noise. And yet that day comes. And it says there, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird. Old people get up early. Now, I'm going to clarify this because I like to get up early, but I like to get up early. There are a lot of old people that get up early, and it's not because they really like to. It's because they don't rest as well at times. The things that startle them and get them up, they get them up. When you get up, 3 or 4 or 5 times a night to go to the bathroom, it's hard to go back to bed. These things happen as you get older. And he's picturing them here as those that rise up with the voice of the bird. And the day will come when I get up early in the morning, and it's not because I have a job to go to. It's not because I have an alarm clock that I set intentionally to get me up early. Those things happen. And it says, and the daughters of music shall be brought low. There's some debate about whether this is still dealing with their hearing or whether it deals with their own personal voice. But either way, it's talking about obviously losing it. It's talking about losing of ability, either to hear or to sing. Let's look real quick. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 19. 2 Samuel chapter 19. The story is here of Barzillai that took care of the king. And it tells us here, 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 32. 2 Samuel 19, verse 32. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old. So 80 years old. And he had provided the king of sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. And the king said unto Barzillai, Come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said unto the king, How long have I to live that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? I am this day 80 years old. And listen to how he describes this. And can I discern between good and evil? His mental state, he recognized, was not, this is not whether he is a good or a bad man. He's not talking about that. But his ability mentally to discern things has started to falter. It happens. Look at verse 35 again. Can thy servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of the singing men and singing women? Wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden unto the Lord, unto my lord the king? The king was going to take care of him, was going to afford him a great benefit and return into Jerusalem with him. And this old man says, listen, I appreciate that, but I don't have much left. I'm 80 years old. I don't have many years left. I can't hear very well. My mental capacity has started to go. My abilities, the ability to taste, discern, understand, all of these things have started to go. I can't hear the voice of the singing anymore. I think I'll just stay. This is, you learn later in this passage, this is my home, just let me stay here. And he's kind of painting a similar picture here to what Solomon has painted for us, that as he has aged, his abilities are faltering. So Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse number 5. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high. Now, some people have a natural fear of heights, but I don't even know that this isn't talking about old people on roller coasters, okay? Let me explain it this way. If I come home from work tomorrow, and I come in the house, and Mandy says, hey, how was your day? And how's everything going? And I say, yeah, everything's fine. Had a good day. I was driving in. I guess Grandma and Grandpa have some kind of project going on. I saw Grandpa out there on the ladder getting up on the roof. What do you think Mandy's going to do? She's going to call somebody, right? She's going to be like, whoa, what's he doing up on a ladder? What's he doing climbing up on a roof, right? There is an age at which is expected that those things cease. There shall be afraid of that which is high. And fears shall be in the way. That word fears means terrors. There actually becomes a day when old people, they don't like to go out at night. And they don't like to go out by themselves. There's just fears. There are fears in the way. And there are terrors. There are things that maybe they used to do that was just natural to do. They don't do anymore. They don't go out by themselves. They don't get out late. They don't stay out past sunset. They don't like to go out when it's dark. Why? They're afraid to. It's just those natural abilities that they had when they were younger, they're gone. And the almond tree shall flourish. You start getting a lot of white up top, right? And the grasshopper shall be a burden. There will be a day when I'm not able to move, pick up a mattress anymore. Or to, grab one side of a dresser with another guy, pick it up, lift it, and move it. There will be a day when a very light weight is still a burden, right? When you're young and you have energy and you have strength, boy, you feel like you could move mountains. You feel like you could lift, you could do anything. There are people that when it's time for us to move or when it's time for us to do rearranging or There are people, if we need help with something, depending on what it is, there are people we just don't call to help, because there are just now some things that are beyond the ability. You don't call the grandparents when, hey, I'm moving, can you come and grab the other end of this table and we'll carry it out. The day comes when those things stop, because even the grasshopper is a burden. And desire shall fail. Barzillai described that for us, right? Desires fail. Appetites diminish. Barzillai told us the food had lost its flavor. So he mentions here that desires fail because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Man is going to his long home. And he's not really specifically talking about heaven or hell here. He's talking specifically about the grave. The grave's coming soon. And pretty soon the funeral procession is going to go down the street. He has painted for us a picture of what it is like to get old. And so in chapter 11, when he told you, to use every bit of your youth that you possibly can, he is now describing for you the why. Because if you waste that opportunity, if you waste that time now, if we waste the opportunity that we have while we are young, we will find the day that the desire fails. There will be a day when the desire can't be accomplished. The want to may be there, but the ability is no longer there. And you won't be able to see, and you won't be able to hear, and you won't be able to lift, and you'll be hunched over. And you see how this builds on chapter 11. And here's how he describes it at the end. He speaks of verse 6, the silver cord be loosed, the golden bowl broken, the pitcher broken or shattered at the fountain, and the wheel broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to the God who gave it. He pictures age, and age comes on, and it hurts, and you begin to lose all these abilities. And he culminates that by saying, you're going to the grave. And there's no going back from that. That's the long home. However long youth is, however long old age is, we have a long home. Once we go to the grave, that's it for this life. And it says there in verse 7 that we'll return to the dust. That's what we were made from. When God created man in the early part of Genesis, the Bible says that he took the dust of the ground and he fashioned it. He breathed into it the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And yet, just as it mentions that that's what we were made from, it tells us at several places in the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, Job chapter 34, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, that is what we will return to. We will someday, they'll put our bodies into the ground, they'll decay, and we will return to dust. And while he hasn't painted a very nice picture of what it's like to get old, this is reality he's talking about. These days are coming, and they're coming to all. To neglect to consider those things, to put those things off in the mind, isn't wise. That should be a challenge. It should be the encouragement to those that are young to do all of the things that he mentioned in chapter 11. Read these chapters together. Keep all of the thoughts in context. Go, do, see, enjoy. Keeping God in mind. Don't neglect to be considerate of him. Don't neglect to have some of the energy that is spent, being that work. But the day is coming when troubles will come, when that youthful light is turned to darkness, and you'll wake up one day and you won't be able to do what you want to do. So while you can do what you want to do, don't waste that, right? Don't waste that. Verse 8, he's come full circle. Just like he started the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. In chapter 1, it was the circle of this world, right? How he talked about the oceans, how he talked about time, as he talked about the earth's cycles. Well, he's going to finish the book talking about another cycle. He's talked about the cycle of life, then youth, and old age, and death, and then the turning to dust and returning, the spirit returning to the God who gave it. And it all seems so empty. And as a view of life taken under the sun, it is. Chapter 12 seems like a bad way to go. If you don't have any greater mindset, if you don't have anything to look forward to after this life, if you don't have any spiritual understanding of what is yet to come, if you just want to look at this life, boy, that really seems to be, those can be empty thoughts. That you have youth, you have energy, and yet you're not wise enough to actually understand it and see the ability and time and opportunity you have, so you waste it only to get older and then have the wisdom kick in, but not the ability. And that seems backwards. That seems empty. It didn't seem like it should be that way. Solomon says that seems to be the way it is. So he has taken this portion of the book to bring those thoughts into our minds. If you'll be mindful, if you'll listen to the preacher from Ecclesiastes 11 and 12, you'll be mindful of the opportunity, the current opportunity that is given. All right, number 3, last thoughts. Let's go over his final thoughts here in this book. It says in verse 9, moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yea, he gave good heed, sought out, and set in order many proverbs. Solomon was wise. We know that at this time, we consider Solomon to be the wisest man who was alive. And he set out to give that wisdom to others. Now, I don't know if it's unintentionally or maybe he got there in a roundabout way. The book of Ecclesiastes is full of wisdom. You get the feeling from the way that he's writing it, he's coming to a different conclusion maybe. But you and I can see the conclusions that he's come to actually have practical teaching for us, right? A view of life under the sun, a view of life that does not, take anything greater into understanding, quickly becomes a vicious struggle. Any search to find meaning, value, or worthwhile in this world under the sun without a view of the Lord, without a view of his promises of blessing or that which is to come, it certainly becomes counterproductive. He has spent his time, he has spent much money and effort and time to try and find some kind of value and meaning under the sun. Now, this book is his way of telling you that that his search was all vain, that his search was all a struggle. The best thing that he could come up with at the end was, I still think that it's better to live wisely, and I have been able to see, the benefits of wisdom, and here are some wise thoughts, sprinkled throughout. But the whole book to us is wise because we can look at a man who had the ability to pursue whatever he wanted, and he's told us it wasn't worthwhile. Okay? Well, what a great lesson, right? What a lesson for us. He's going to mention that here in just a minute. But it tells us that because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. And we have his Proverbs. We have some things, obviously I'm sure there were some things in the book of Proverbs that were written later. And there's some things that Solomon learned in this pursuit that he was able to teach and give good wisdom. It says there that he gave good heed and sought out. I mean, his words were carefully thought out. These proverbs were tested and considered for accuracy. Verse 10, it says, the preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. Solomon's words were chosen carefully. There was an attempt to be as pleasant as possible, right? You do want to, you want to give people acceptable words. Nobody wants to listen to negative Nancy all the time. I sought out acceptable words, but it does say, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. Okay? If you want to give people acceptable words, that's fine, but you make sure that when you give them, they are founded in truth and they are upright. Solomon's not going to give people what they want to hear just because it sounds pleasant. It's good that it sounds pleasant. Some of the Proverbs, some of the Proverbs can totally break your back if you think about it, but it's written so nicely. But they're founded in truth. Okay, they're upright. The words of the wise are as goads and as nails, fastened by the masters of assemblies, which are given from one shepherd. Sharp nails, right? To the point. They drive deep. That's what you want to use. If you're going to drive a tent in the ground, you want something that's sharp and pointed, that when you hit it and hammer, it goes. It goes in and it goes deep. And that's what Solomon's Proverbs can be and should be. And that's how the words of the wise should be taken. And further, by these, my son, verse 12, be admonished. Okay? Listen to what I have said. Because of making many books, there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. You know how Solomon knew that? Well, we just went through the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon has pursued it. And you know what he's come up with? A bunch of weariness to his flesh. How many times has he told us that this didn't mean anything? It was all empty. I found that it was vain. I found that it was not fruitful. I found that there was nothing there. This pursuit that he has gone on, he's able to look and tell his son now, okay, be admonished by the things that I've said. You don't have to go and find this out for yourself. Listen to me when I tell you it was a fruitless journey. Listen to these proverbs as I give them to you. Listen to the words of the wise man. You don't have to go out and experience it yourself to know this is true. This is right. It's absolutely a good thing to listen. Making of many books, there is no end. If you want to do the same thing, if you want to pursue the same thing Solomon pursued, you could do it, and you could write your own book. You can have your own book of Ecclesiastes. You could spend your life pursuing all the gratification of the flesh, trying to find some meaning of life, trying to find some great source of value. But if you keep the same parameters and you're just going to view life as under the sun, you're not going to find anything different. Sure, let's fill the world up with books. Let's let everybody tell their story. But Solomon's like, that's just going to be a weariness of the flesh. Would you need to read my story? Would you need to read Brother John's? Would you need to read anyone else's story once you've read Solomon's? And we know that he had the capability and that he could do all that he wanted to do. And the wisest person that has lived has said, it's not worth it. There's not much there, guys. It's good advice, okay? Listen to him. To the man that's saying, listen, I lived it. You don't have to go live it yourself. Listen from my experience. Let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. These are the most famous, I'm sure, verses from Ecclesiastes. Let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. And that may be the most over-the-sun thing that he said yet. Here's what I've discovered. Here's the end of my thoughts. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. This is the basics, guys. This is the foundation. This is the path. This is it. All of the other things that I have expended so much time, effort, and money trying to pursue, I'm going to bottle it down for you and tell you that a life of obedience, faithful service, fear of the Lord, that's your duty. To be obedient, to be submissive, fearful of God, keeping his commandments, knowing that God, here's our motive, right? That God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. If there is nothing else over the sun, If life under the sun is all that there is, and he's just told you in chapters 11 and 12, you've got some time as a young person, you got a little bit of time as an old person, then you die. Trust me, as you get older, you're not going to have nearly as much ability and all that. You know what? You would look at that and you would say, well, boy, I better live it up as a young person. I better do all of these things. You know, if you take life as only under the sun, that would be your motive. You would say, man, I'm going to get old, I'm going to die, I better do all that I can while I'm young. And you might neglect the creator part. You might neglect the accountability part that he mentions in chapter 11 and 12. But he tells us God will bring every work into judgment. And I tried to find everything that there was under the sun, and yet when this life is over, there's an accountability after this. This life is not all that there is. So a life that is spent pursuing pleasure and gratification as if this is all there is, guys, it's wrong. There is more to life than just verse 7, where they put us in the ground and this body turns to dust. There's actually a day that comes after that where there's an accountability. There's actually an eternal life that comes after that. And Solomon has now said, I think, some of his wisest words from this entire book. You can't, don't pursue what I pursued. Listen to what I've said. Believe me when I tell you that it wasn't worth it. Fear God. Keep his commandments. We will someday stand before him. We will someday answer to him and give an account for those things. So hear all that he said. It's been 12 chapters. It's been a lot of questionable thoughts, questionable pursuits. But at the end, the wisest man that ever lived came to a decent conclusion. I've spent it all. I've done it all. I've lived it all. But I'm telling you that all of man's duty can really be summed up here. Okay? Faithful, fearful, and obedient. Father, we're coming today and we're thankful to be here. We're thankful for your